Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The information presented in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute professional legal, religious, or psychological advice. Divorce laws vary significantly by state and jurisdiction, and Islamic jurisprudence regarding family law is interpreted through various schools of thought and local cultural practices. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with qualified legal professionals and recognized religious authorities regarding their specific circumstances. This content is intended to provide historical context and explore contemporary trends, not to serve as a guide for individual legal or religious decision-making. Imagine standing in a high-ceilinged courtroom in Northern Virginia. On one side of the mahogany table is a woman who has lived in the United States for 20 years. In her hand, she holds a civil divorce decree issued by the state, officially terminating her marriage under American law. But in her heart, and in the eyes of her community, she is still married. Across the room, her husband refuses to grant her a religious divorce, leaving her in a state of spiritual and social limbo known as a limping marriage. This is the reality for thousands of American Muslims today, a high-stakes intersection of 1,400 years of religious tradition and the 21st century American legal system. For over a century, the Muslim experience in America has been defined by the struggle to reconcile these two worlds. Today, we are seeing a seismic shift in how divorce is handled, perceived, and survived within this community. This is not just a story about the end of marriages. It is a deep dive into the evolution of an entire social fabric. This masterclass is designed to solve the confusion that many American families face when navigating the complex web of religious obligations and civil requirements. By the end of this series, you will understand the historical trends that brought us to this point, the potential outcomes of landmark legal cases that have shaped how Islamic marriage contracts are viewed in U.S. courts, and the case studies of communities that are successfully bridging the gap between faith and the law. We are moving past the surface-level taboos to look at the data and the lived experiences of a population that is redefining what it means to seek a fresh start. To understand where we are, we must look back at the historical trends of the early 20th century. In the 1920s and 30s, the first significant waves of Muslim immigrants settled in places like Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and Dearborn, Michigan. In these early enclaves, the community was small and the social pressure to maintain the family unit was immense. Divorce was a rarity, often because there was no formal religious infrastructure to handle it. If a couple faced irreconcilable differences, they often had to choose between staying in a broken union or facing total social ostracization. There were no Sharia councils, no professionalized Muslim counseling services, and very few imams who understood the nuances of American civil law. The transition from these early, isolated communities to the massive, diverse, and professionalized population we see today has completely transformed the landscape of Islamic divorce in America. One of the most significant points of friction in the American legal system involves the mahr, or the Islamic dowry. In a traditional Islamic marriage contract, the mahr is a mandatory gift from the groom to the bridge, often divided into a prompt payment made at the time of the wedding and a deferred payment made in the event of death or divorce. In the United States, this religious requirement has become a central point of litigation. For decades, American judges were baffled by these contracts. Were they prenuptial agreements? Were they simple religious gifts? Or were they unenforceable under the First Amendment's Establishment Clause? Consider the case studies of different state courts. In some jurisdictions, judges have viewed the mahr as a valid contract, provided it meets the neutral principles of law. For example, if a contract clearly states that a husband owes his wife $50,000 upon divorce, some courts in states like New Jersey or California have enforced these as standard contractual obligations. However, other courts have hesitated, fearing that enforcing a religious document violates the separation of church and state. This legal tug-of-war has created a landscape where the potential outcomes of a divorce can vary wildly depending on which state line you happen to live behind. This inconsistency is one of the primary reasons why modern American Muslim couples are increasingly turning to dual-layered legal protections, hiring both a family law attorney and consulting a religious scholar to ensure their rights are protected in both spheres. Furthermore, we must address the data surrounding the limping marriage phenomenon. Research conducted by organizations like the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding indicates that while divorce rates among American Muslims are beginning to mirror the general U.S. population, the obstacles to finalizing those divorces are unique. A civil divorce is a matter of filing paperwork with the state, But a religious divorce often requires the husband's consent through a process known as talaq. If a husband refuses, the wife must seek a khula, a divorce initiated by the woman, which often involves returning her mahr, or a fash, a judicial annulment granted by a religious council. In the United States, where no formal Islamic courts exist with legal teeth, women often find themselves stuck. They are legally single but religiously bound, unable to remarry within their faith or move forward with their lives without facing community backlash. This brings us to the rise of the Sharia Council in America. Over the last 30 years, we have seen the emergence of professionalized bodies of scholars who aim to resolve these deadlocks. These councils provide a middle ground, offering a process for religious dissolution that respects both the spiritual needs of the couple and the reality of their American residency. However, these councils are not without controversy. Some critics argue they lack the authority to enforce their decisions, while others worry they may inadvertently create a parallel legal system. The reality is more nuanced. These councils often act as mediators, working to ensure that when a civil judge signs the divorce decree, the religious community recognizes it as well. The social evolution is equally fascinating. Throughout the mid-20th century, divorce in the American Muslim community was frequently shrouded in silence. It was seen as a failure of the immigrant dream, a sign that the family had become too westernized. But as second and third generation Muslims have come of age, the conversation has shifted. There is a growing trend toward transparency. We see this in the proliferation of support groups, podcasts, and even social media influencers who speak openly about their experiences with divorce. This shift is not necessarily an endorsement of divorce, but rather a pragmatic recognition that a healthy community must have a healthy way to handle the end of a marriage. As we dive deeper into this century of change, we see that the American Muslim experience is not a monolith. The challenges faced by a South Asian family in Houston may differ significantly from those of an African American Muslim family in Chicago or a recent Syrian refugee family in San Diego. Each of these groups brings different cultural interpretations of divorce to the American table. Yet, they all share the same legal reality. The United States Constitution and the state family codes are the ultimate arbiters of property division, child custody, and alimony. In the segments to follow, we will break down the specific legal mechanics of how Islamic marriage contracts are being rewritten to survive U.S. court scrutiny. We will examine the data on how divorce affects children within these communities, and look at the step-by-step evolution of the American imam from a simple prayer leader to a complex family mediator. The goal is to move beyond the headlines and understand the deep, structural changes that are happening in living rooms across the country. We are witnessing the birth of a uniquely American Islamic family law, one that is being forged in the heat of courtrooms and the quiet reflections of mosque basements. This is the story of how a community maintains its soul while navigating the laws of its land. To understand the modern legal collision of Islamic divorce in America, we must look at the year 2026 as a tipping point. The demographic shifts of the last 20 years have created a massive volume of cases where civil judges are being asked to interpret documents that were once seen as purely spiritual. We are currently seeing a historical trend where the mahr, or the deferred dowry, is no longer treated as a footnote in a religious ceremony, but as a central piece of evidence in high-stakes financial litigation. Imagine if a couple, let us call them Sarah and Omar, married in 2021 in a beautiful ceremony in Irvine, California. Sarah is a software engineer and Omar is a healthcare administrator. At the time of their wedding, they signed a nikah contract that specified a deferred mahr of $75,000. To them, at that moment, it was a symbolic gesture of protection and commitment. Fast forward to 2026. The marriage has broken down due to irreconcilable differences. As they sit in a California Superior Court, that $75,000 figure is no longer symbolic. It is the primary point of contention in their asset division. Sarah's legal team argues that the nikah is a valid prenuptial agreement under the California Uniform Premarital Agreement Act. They present the document as a clear contract where Omar promised a specific sum in the event of a divorce. Omar's legal team, however, argues that the mahr was a religious ritual, not a secular contract. They claim that enforcing it would require the judge to delve into religious doctrine, which is a violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. This scenario is playing out in courtrooms across the country, from New Jersey to Texas, and the potential outcomes are reshaping how Muslim families approach marriage from the very start. The central legal question often hinges on the neutral principles of law doctrine. This doctrine allows a civil court to resolve a dispute involving a religious organization or document, provided the court can do so by relying on neutral, secular legal principles without interpreting religious tenets. In the case of Sarah and Omar, a judge in 2026 would look for 4 specific elements to determine if that $75,000 is enforceable. First, was there clear consideration? In legal terms, this means something of value was exchanged. Second, was there mutual assent? Did both parties understand what they were signing? Or was it a rushed document signed 10 minutes before the guests arrived? Third, is the amount definite? A contract promising a vague amount like a reasonable sum is harder to enforce than one specifying a clear dollar amount. Finally, is it legal under public policy? Historical trends show us that the most successful cases for enforcing a MAR occur when the document looks and acts like a standard American contract. Case studies from the early 2000s, such as the landmark Otatala versus Otatala case in New Jersey, set the foundation for this. In that case, the judge found that because the MAR was signed in the presence of witnesses and specified a clear amount, it could be enforced like any other civil agreement. However, if Sarah and Omar had simply written according to Sharia on a napkin, the 2026 court would likely view that as too vague for enforcement. This legal friction creates a step-by-step necessity for modern couples to engage in what we call double lawyering. In 2026, it is becoming standard practice for Muslim couples to have their nikah contract reviewed by a family law attorney before the religious ceremony ever takes place. This ensures that the religious obligation is mirrored in a secular prenuptial agreement that uses terms like equitable distribution and spousal support, rather than just religious terminology. This shift represents a profound evolution in the community. It is a move from a handshake and blessing culture to a rigorous, legally defended infrastructure. We must also look at the financial data involving alimony and asset division. In traditional Islamic jurisprudence, the concept of alimony or nafaka is often limited to the iddah period, which is typically 3 months following the divorce. During this time, the husband is responsible for the wife's housing and maintenance. However, American civil law operates on the principle of equitable distribution or community property, which can result in long-term alimony or a 50-50 split of all assets earned during the marriage. This creates a massive financial gap. Consider another case study from a 2026 filing in Illinois. A husband may believe that by paying the MAR in 3 months of support, he has fulfilled his religious and financial obligations. But the state of Illinois may order him to pay 20% of his income for the next 10 years. This leads to a complex negotiation process where religious scholars and secular mediators must work together. The potential outcomes of these negotiations often involve a trade-off. A wife might waive her right to a portion of a retirement account in exchange for the immediate payment of a large deferred MAR. This is the practical, gritty reality of how faith meets the ledger in modern America. Furthermore, the role of the imam has transformed into that of an expert witness. In a 2026 divorce trial, you might see a local religious leader sitting on the stand, being cross-examined by a divorce attorney. The attorney might ask, is the MAR intended to replace alimony, or is it in addition to it? The imam's answer can influence how a judge views the fairness of the overall settlement. If the imam explains that the MAR is a woman's separate property intended for her long-term security, the judge might treat it as a non-marital asset. If the imam cannot provide a clear, secularly accessible explanation, the judge may simply roll it into the general pot of marital assets to be divided. The complexity intensifies when we consider international implications. Many American Muslim couples married overseas, in countries like Egypt, Pakistan, or Jordan, where the marriage contract is a state-governed legal document. When these couples move to the United States and later seek a divorce, the American court must decide whether to grant comity to the foreign contract. Comity is the legal principle where one jurisdiction recognizes the acts of another. However, American courts will often refuse comity if the foreign law is found to be repugnant to local public policy, such as laws that do not allow for the equitable distribution of property, or those that severely limit a woman's right to initiate divorce. As we look at the data from 2026, we see a rise in the use of religious arbitration clauses. These are specific sections within a marriage contract where the couple agrees that if a dispute arises, they will first go to a recognized panel of mediators who understand both the law of the land and the spirit of the faith. These panels are not trying to replace the U.S. court system. Rather, they are trying to provide a framework for a religious settlement that a U.S. judge can then easily sign off on. This avoids the need for a judge to ever interpret a Quranic verse, keeping the process within the bounds of the Constitution, while satisfying the religious conscience of the couple. This brings us to a critical realization. The divorce process for an American Muslim is not a single journey, but two parallel tracks that must somehow arrive at the same destination. If the tracks diverge, the consequences are devastating. But what happens when one person refuses to stay on the track? What happens when the civil law says you are free, but the religious community says you are still bound? In the next part, we will explore the dark side of this legal intersection, the phenomenon of the refused divorce and the invisible chains that can keep a person trapped for years, even after the civil judge has walked away from the bench. We will examine the specific social pressures and the emerging solutions that are being developed to prevent the spiritual limbo of the limping marriage. To understand the weight of spiritual limbo, imagine a woman named Aisha living in a suburb of Chicago in 2026. Aisha has been civilly divorced for 3 years. In the eyes of the state of Illinois, she is a single woman with the full right to move on, remarry, and rebuild her life. However, her former husband refuses to pronounce the religious divorce, known as the talaq. Within her social and religious circles, this puts Aisha in the position of a captive wife. She cannot enter into a new religious marriage, which is a requirement for many in her community to consider a union legitimate. This is the limping marriage, a state where a person is legally free but religiously shackled. This phenomenon is not merely a theological disagreement. It is a profound social crisis that has forced American Muslim institutions to innovate at a rapid pace over the last century. Historical trends show that in the mid to late 20th century, many American imams were hesitant to interfere in what they viewed as a husband's unilateral right to divorce. The traditional interpretation of Islamic law gives the husband the primary power to initiate divorce through talaq. If a husband refused, a wife's primary recourse was the khula, where she could initiate the end of the marriage by returning her mahr. But what happens if the husband refuses the khula as well? In a Muslim-majority country, a state-appointed judge could step in and dissolve the marriage through a process called fash. But in the United States, there is no state-sanctioned religious court. For decades, this left women like Aisha with nowhere to turn. By 2026, the landscape has shifted due to the rise of North American Sharia councils and the professionalization of the American rabbinate's equivalent in the Muslim community. These councils have begun to implement a step-by-step process to resolve these stalemates. The first step is typically a mandatory period of mediation. If mediation fails and it is proven that a civil divorce has already been finalized, many modern American councils are now exercising the power of fash. They argue that the civil divorce decree itself can be recognized as a religious dissolution, provided the grounds for divorce meet certain ethical and religious criteria. This is a massive departure from historical norms and represents a distinctly American evolution of Islamic jurisprudence. However, the potential outcomes of seeking a council-led annulment can be fraught with difficulty. Case studies from 2024 and 2025 highlight a disturbing trend known as divorce or mahr extortion. In these scenarios, a husband might offer to grant the religious talaq only if the wife agrees to waive her civilly mandated child support or give up her share of the marital home. In 2026, we are seeing more American courts take a stand against this. Judges are beginning to recognize this behavior as a form of spiritual or coercive control. While a U.S. judge cannot order a man to perform a religious ritual like the talaq due to First Amendment constraints, they can take a party's conduct into account when determining equitable distribution of assets, if that conduct is seen as a bad faith negotiation tactic. To prevent these scenarios from occurring in the first place, the most significant innovation in the last century has been the widespread adoption of the Islamic prenuptial agreement. These are not the prenups you see in Hollywood movies. In the American Muslim context of 2026, these documents often include a clause known as tafwid al-talaq, or delegated divorce. Imagine if, at the time of the wedding, the husband signs a document that delegates the right of divorce to the wife under specific conditions, such as if he refuses to grant a religious divorce after a civil one has been finalized. This simple legal mechanism effectively ends the possibility of a limping marriage. It creates a self-executing religious divorce that mirrors the civil one. Step by step, the implementation of these contracts is changing the power dynamics within the community. When a couple like Aisha and her former husband sit down with an imam today, the conversation is increasingly focused on these preventative measures. Organizations like the Muslim Endorsement Council and various legal advocacy groups are providing standardized templates that have been vetted by both Sharia scholars and American family law attorneys. This dual vetting is crucial because a contract that is religiously sound but legally unenforceable in a U.S. court is useless, and vice versa. The social pressure surrounding these situations is also evolving. In the 1980s, a woman who sought a divorce through a counsel might have been viewed with suspicion. Today, the data suggests a trend toward community empathy. Modern mosque boards are increasingly comprised of professionals, doctors, lawyers, and educators, who prioritize the protection of vulnerable members. We are seeing the emergence of domestic violence advocates within the mosque structure, who work directly with legal aid societies. This multidisciplinary approach is a hallmark of the 2026 American Muslim experience. It recognizes that divorce is a holistic event that impacts a person's legal standing, financial security, mental health, and spiritual peace. Yet, we cannot ignore the complexities of the FASH process itself. When a counsel considers an annulment, they must conduct a thorough investigation. This involves interviewing both parties, reviewing civil court documents, and sometimes even consulting with psychological professionals. This is a rigorous, time-consuming process that aims to maintain the sanctity of marriage while ensuring justice. The potential outcomes of such an investigation are not always a foregone conclusion. In some cases, counsels have successfully mediated a reconciliation. In others, they have identified patterns of abuse that necessitated an immediate religious dissolution to ensure the safety of the woman and her children. The financial implications of these religious proceedings in the U.S. are also coming under greater scrutiny. There is an ongoing debate within the community about the role of the mahr in a post-civil divorce world. If a woman receives a multi-million-dollar settlement in civil court, does she still have a religious right to her deferred mahr? Some scholars argue that the civil settlement encompasses the mahr, while others maintain that the mahr is an independent debt that must be paid regardless of the state's division of assets. In 2026, the case studies are split, with different counsels providing different guidance based on the specific wording of the original marriage contract. This brings us to the critical intersection of child custody. The civil courts use the standard of the best interests of the child. Traditional Islamic law has historically utilized specific age-based milestones to determine which parent a child should live with. The friction between these two systems is where some of the most intense battles are fought in the modern era. How does a mother in 2026 navigate a situation where her faith might suggest one path for her children's upbringing, while the law of the land dictates another? As we move forward in this deep dive, we have to look at the most sensitive area of all: the children. What happens when the religious community's expectations for custody collide with the rulings of a U.S. family court judge? How are modern American Muslims balancing the preservation of religious identity for their children with the reality of joint custody and co-parenting in a secular society? The next part of our series will break down the data on custody outcomes and examine how the concept of the best interests of the child is being reinterpreted through a lens of faith and modern psychology. We will look at how the next generation is being shaped by these legal and spiritual tugs of war. In the American legal landscape of 2026, the concept of child custody has become the primary battlefield where ancient traditions and modern statutes collide. To understand the current state of divorce in the Muslim American community, we must first look at the profound tension between the Islamic concept of hadana and the American legal standard, known as the best interests of the child. Historically, Islamic jurisprudence, or fiqh, provided a structured timeline for custody. In many classical interpretations, the mother was granted the right of hadana, or physical care, for young children, typically until age 7 for boys and 9 or 11 for girls. At these milestones, custody would often shift to the father, who was responsible for the child's formal education, moral discipline, and financial provision. This was a clear, predictable framework that provided a sense of order in traditional societies. However, as we move through 2026, American courts do not recognize these age-based milestones. Instead, every single custody case is decided through the lens of the best interests of the child, or BIOC. This is a holistic, subjective, and highly discretionary standard that looks at factors such as the emotional bond between the parent and child, the capacity of each parent to provide a stable environment, the continuity of the child's current living situation, and the physical and mental health of all parties involved. For a community rooted in tradition, this shift from a rule-based system to a discretion-based system creates a high-stakes environment of uncertainty. Imagine if a father named Zaid and a mother named Miriam are navigating a divorce in a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. Their daughter Amina has just turned 10. Zaid, leaning on his cultural upbringing and religious understanding, believes that it is now his right and duty to have primary physical custody of Amina, to ensure she remains connected to her heritage and faith during her formative teenage years. He enters the courtroom expecting the judge to respect this transition, but Maryam's legal team presents data showing that Maryam has been the primary caregiver, the one who handles the daily school runs, the doctor appointments, and the emotional support. In 2026, the potential outcomes for Zaid are often jarring. A U.S. judge will almost never move a child based on a religious milestone. Instead, the court will likely favor the status quo primary caregiver, leading to a direct conflict between Zaid's spiritual expectations and his legal reality. This conflict has forced a historical trend toward the creation of incredibly detailed parenting plans. In 2026, a standard 5-page custody agreement is no longer sufficient for the American Muslim family. We are seeing 20-page documents that function as a bridge between two worlds. These plans provide a step-by-step breakdown of how a child's religious identity will be preserved in a dual household reality. For example, modern case studies show that successful co-parenting agreements now include specific clauses regarding halal dietary restrictions, ensuring that even if one parent is less observant, the child's religious requirements are met in both homes. They include granular schedules for the two Eids, often alternating the holidays or splitting the day to ensure the child can participate in community prayers with one parent and family celebrations with the other. Furthermore, we must address the complex issue of religious education. In a secular court, a judge cannot mandate that a child attend a specific religious school or Sunday program. However, if the parents have a prior history of enrolling the child in such programs, the court may view the continuation of that education as a point of stability. This leads to a strategic legal maneuver where parents in 2026 are increasingly careful to document the child's involvement in mosque activities long before a divorce is ever filed. They are using the child's religious routine as evidence of a stable environment that should not be disrupted. One of the most high-stakes aspects of this discussion involves the fear of international child abduction, particularly to countries that are not signatories to the Hague Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction. This international treaty is designed to ensure the prompt return of children abducted to or retained in another country. However, many Muslim-majority nations have not signed this treaty, creating a deep-seated anxiety for American judges. In 2026, we are seeing a trend where courts may impose significant travel restrictions on children if there is a perceived risk of them being taken abroad and not returned. This can include the court holding the child's passport, requiring the traveling parent to post a substantial financial bond, or even mandating that the foreign country issue a mirror order, a legal document from the foreign court that mirrors the American custody arrangement. This creates a psychological burden on the family. Imagine if Zaid wants to take Amina to visit her grandparents in a non-Hague country. Even with no intent of abduction, the legal hurdles in 2026 can make such a trip nearly impossible. This leads to a sense of isolation from the global family structure, further complicating the post-divorce adjustment. The data suggests that this fear of abduction is one of the primary reasons why some Muslim American parents hesitate to involve the civil court system at all, sometimes staying in dysfunctional marriages to avoid the risk of losing access to their children across international borders. We also see the rise of the cultural expert witness in these custody battles. In 2026, a family law attorney might hire a scholar or a psychologist who specializes in the Muslim American experience to testify about the importance of community belonging. This expert might explain to a judge why a child's attendance at an Arabic school or a youth group is not an excessive burden, but a vital part of their social development and identity. This step-by-step education of the judiciary is slowly changing the way BIOC is applied, making it more inclusive of religious and cultural needs. But what happens to the children themselves in this tug-of-war? Modern longitudinal studies are beginning to show that the greatest predictor of a child's well-being in the Muslim American community is not the divorce itself, but the level of conflict between the parents. In 2026, we are seeing a move toward parallel parenting in high-conflict cases. This is a model where each parent makes decisions independently when the child is in their care, minimizing the need for direct communication. While this may seem contrary to the traditional emphasis on family unity, it is often the only way to protect the child's mental health in an environment where religious and secular values are in constant friction. The financial component of child support also intersects with religious duty in a unique way. In traditional Islamic law, the father is solely responsible for the child's financial needs, regardless of the mother's wealth. In the U.S., Child support is calculated based on the combined income of both parents. This can lead to a sense of injustice for a mother who feels the father is not fulfilling his religious obligation, or for a father who feels he is being double-charged by both the state and his conscience. In 2026, the potential outcomes for these disputes often involve private side agreements where the father agrees to pay for specific religious expenses, like private school tuition or Hajj savings, outside of the state-mandated support. As we peel back the layers of this century of change, it becomes clear that the focus on children is reshaping the entire community's approach to divorce. It is no longer just about the husband and wife. It is about the preservation of a lineage in a society that often feels alien to their traditions. But as the legal battles for the children rage on, a quieter but equally profound crisis is unfolding in the social sphere. How does a divorced individual, particularly a woman, navigate the community after the decree is signed? What happens to the social capital of a family once the unit is broken? In the next part of our series, we will examine the social rebranding of the divorced American Muslim. We will look at the data on remarriage rates, the evolution of the marriage market for single parents, and the controversial rise of Muslim-specific dating and matrimonial apps that are changing how the community heals and rebuilds. How is the 2026 landscape for finding love again different from anything we have seen in the last 100 years? The landscape of 2026 presents a radical departure from the mid-century social structures that once governed the American Muslim community. For decades, the social capital of an individual was inextricably tied to their marital status. To be divorced was to enter a state of social invisibility, particularly for women. However, historical trends over the last 100 years show a steady transition from a culture of collective shame to one of individual autonomy and digital empowerment. In the 1950s or 1960s, a divorced Muslim woman in a city like Toledo or New York might have found herself excluded from communal dinners or viewed as a cautionary tale for younger generations. Fast forward to 2026, and we are seeing the emergence of a sophisticated, multi-billion-dollar marriage market specifically designed to cater to the needs of the divorced and single-parent demographic. Imagine if we follow the journey of a woman named Fatima, a 34-year-old software architect living in Dearborn, Michigan, in the year 2026. Fatima has 2 young children and a civil divorce decree that was finalized 18 months ago. In a previous era, Fatima's prospects for remarriage would have been limited by the traditional Auntie network, a decentralized web of older community members who acted as gatekeepers and matchmakers. This network often prioritized biological first-timers and viewed divorce as a significant defect in a candidate's profile. But Fatima is not relying on the Auntie network. Instead, she is part of a demographic that has pivoted toward high-tech, AI-driven matrimonial platforms that have fundamentally disrupted the old social order. In 2026, these platforms are not just simple dating apps. They have evolved into complex ecosystems that provide potential outcomes based on deep learning algorithms. For someone like Fatima, the app does not just filter for age and location. It utilizes case studies of successful second marriages to match her with individuals who share her specific co-parenting philosophy, her level of religious practice, and her career ambitions. The data indicates that the stigma of divorce is being actively eroded by the sheer volume of users in the second-timer category. On these platforms, being a divorcee is no longer a footnote to be hidden. It is a shared experience that often signals a level of emotional maturity and a realistic understanding of what it takes to maintain a partnership. This technological shift has a step-by-step impact on the social rebranding of the individual. The first step involves the creation of a digital identity that emphasizes resilience rather than failure. In 2026, Fatima's profile is likely to include a section on lessons learned and personal growth, a framing that was virtually non-existent in the community's social discourse 20 years ago. The second step is the bypass of the parental gatekeeper. While many users still involve their families in the final stages of a match, the initial vetting process is now firmly in the hands of the individuals themselves. This has led to a historical trend of higher agency for women, who are increasingly prioritizing compatibility over community expectations. The financial independence of the 2026 Muslim woman is the primary driver of this social evolution. As more women like Fatima hold high-ranking positions in tech, medicine, and law, their bargaining power within the marriage market has shifted. In a second marriage, the negotiation for the mahr often looks very different. Data suggests that while first-time marriages may still lean toward traditional symbolic amounts, second-time marriages for professional women frequently involve more complex financial arrangements, such as investment portfolios or equity in property, treated as separate from the marital estate. This reflects a pragmatic approach to security that acknowledges the potential outcomes of a future dissolution. However, the social rebuilding process is not without its frictions. We must examine the case studies of the social capital transition. When a couple divorces in 2026, the community still faces the challenge of picking sides. In many suburban mosques, the divorce of a prominent couple can lead to a fracture in social circles. Imagine a scenario where Fatima and her ex-husband were both active members of their local Islamic center's board. The fallout often results in a quiet redistribution of social capital, where one party may feel the need to move to a different mosque to avoid the awkwardness of shared social spaces. This has led to the rise of what sociologists call mosque hopping, a trend where divorced individuals seek a fresh start in a neighboring community to rebuild their social lives without the baggage of their previous marriage. To address this, we are seeing the growth of dedicated support groups within larger American mosques. In 2026, it is no longer uncommon to see a Friday night program titled Life After Divorce. These groups function as a hybrid of a spiritual circle and a professional networking group. They provide a step-by-step guide for navigating the complexities of single parenthood, managing relationships with ex-in-laws, and re-entering the dating scene in a way that aligns with personal values. The existence of these groups is a testament to the community's recognition that the family unit is changing, and the institution must adapt to support all its members, not just the traditional nuclear family. We also have to look at the impact on men in this social landscape. In 2026, the archetype of the divorced Muslim man is also undergoing a transformation. Historical trends suggest that men often remarried much faster than women, often seeking younger, never-married partners. But recent data shows a shifting trend toward men in their late 30s and 40s seeking out partners who are also divorced. The reasoning is often grounded in a desire for a partner who understands the complexities of child custody and the nuances of balancing professional life with family obligations. Case studies show that these second marriages, often referred to as blended families, are becoming a standard feature of the American Muslim demographic. The blending of families brings its own set of social challenges. In 2026, we are seeing a rise in the need for specialized counseling services that understand the intersection of Islamic ethics and step-parenting dynamics. How does a stepfather navigate his role in a household where the biological father is still very much involved? How do children from two different previous marriages integrate into a single home while maintaining their unique religious and cultural traditions? The potential outcomes for these families depend heavily on the availability of culturally competent therapists who can provide a framework for these new social realities. This leads us to the broader question of the community's future. If the divorce rate continues to mirror the general U.S. population, the American Muslim community of 2050 will look vastly different than the one of 1990. We are moving toward a more fluid, less rigid social structure where identity is built on multiple foundations, not just a single lifelong marriage. But as we embrace this new transparency and digital autonomy, what are the unseen psychological costs? How are the individuals within these statistics processing the trauma of a broken home, especially when the community's religious ideals still hold the lifelong marriage as the gold standard? In the next part of this masterclass, we will dive into the silent struggle that often goes unaddressed in the courtroom and the mosque, the mental health crisis. We will examine the data on depression and anxiety among divorced American Muslims and look at how the concept of sabr or patience is being reevaluated in the context of modern therapy. We will explore the case studies of pioneers who are integrating clinical psychology with spiritual healing to ensure that when a marriage ends, the individual does not lose themselves in the process. How is the 2026 approach to trauma changing the way we view the very concept of a good life? To address the mental health crisis within the context of a 2026 American Muslim divorce, we must first confront a word that has been both a source of immense strength and, at times, a tool for unintentional suppression: sabr. Traditionally translated as patience or perseverance, sabr has historically been used by well-meaning family members and religious leaders to encourage couples to endure marital strife for the sake of the children or the community's reputation. However, as we look at the historical trends leading into 2026, we see a profound reinterpretation of this concept. In the modern American context, sabr is increasingly being defined not as passive endurance of toxic or abusive situations, but as the persistent, active pursuit of justice and well-being. This shift is at the heart of the community's mental health revolution. Imagine if we look at the case study of a man named David, a 38-year-old engineer in Houston, Texas. In 2026, David is 6 months into a grueling separation. He grew up in a household where divorce was seen as a failure of faith. When his marriage began to deteriorate, his first instinct was to pray harder and remain silent about his increasing anxiety and bouts of clinical depression. He felt that seeking therapy was a betrayal of his spiritual reliance on God. This internal conflict, the idea that mental health struggles are a sign of weak faith, is a legacy of the 20th century immigrant experience that many are still fighting to unlearn. The data in 2026 tells a stark story. Recent surveys conducted by major Muslim mental health organizations show that individuals undergoing divorce are at a significantly higher risk for generalized anxiety disorder and social isolation. For men like David, the risk is compounded by a cultural expectation of stoicism. Historical trends suggest that while women often find support through social networks or support groups, men are more likely to retreat into themselves, leading to potential outcomes of long-term psychological distress. But David's story in 2026 takes a different turn because of the structural changes in how the American mosque operates. The first step-by-step change we see is the integration of the therapy-imam partnership. In 2026, when David goes to his local imam to discuss his divorce, he is not just given a list of verses on patience. Instead, the imam, who has likely been trained in basic psychological first aid, refers him to a trauma-informed Muslim counselor. This is the new standard of care. This partnership acknowledges that while spiritual guidance is vital, it cannot replace clinical intervention for trauma, depression, or complex grief. By 2026, we see a proliferation of organizations like the Khalil Center or Maristan, which have built a network of practitioners who can speak the language of both the DSM-5 and the Quran. For David, this means his therapy sessions involve deconstructing the spiritual bypassing he experienced in his youth. Spiritual bypassing is the tendency to use religious explanations to avoid dealing with painful psychological wounds. His therapist helps him understand that seeking a divorce to preserve his mental health and provide a stable environment for his children is, in fact, an act of sabr. It is the active perseverance required to move toward a healthier state of being. This reframing is a critical step in the healing process for thousands of American Muslims today. We must also examine the case study of individuals dealing with high-conflict divorces where emotional abuse was a factor. Imagine a woman named Chloe in Northern Virginia. In 2026, Chloe is navigating a divorce from a partner who used religious rhetoric to maintain control. This is often referred to as spiritual abuse, where a spouse misinterprets religious texts to demand absolute obedience or to isolate the other partner from their support system. In previous decades, Chloe might have felt she had no religious grounds to leave if there was no physical violence. But the 2026 landscape of Islamic jurisprudence in America has become much more sensitive to the reality of emotional and psychological harm. Step by step, Chloe's journey involves reclaiming her spiritual identity from her abuser. This process often starts with the recognition that her inherent dignity, as established in her faith, is not contingent on her marital status. We are seeing more and more case studies where women are utilizing religious annulment, or fash, specifically on the grounds of emotional cruelty. This requires a sophisticated coordination between her legal team and her religious advocates. Her lawyers provide the evidence of the high-conflict nature of the marriage, while her religious advocates provide the theological justification for the dissolution. The potential outcomes for children in these mental health scenarios are also a major focus in 2026. Research indicates that children do not just witness their parents' divorce, they absorb the emotional environment of the home. When parents like David and Chloe prioritize their own mental health and engage in therapy, the data shows a significant improvement in the child's resilience and long-term adjustment. We are seeing a trend toward child-centered divorce coaching within the Muslim community, where specialists help parents communicate the news of the divorce in a way that minimizes the child's sense of guilt or instability. Furthermore, we cannot ignore the role of the digital community in 2026. While social media can often be a source of comparison and stress, it has also become a lifeline for those seeking to destigmatize mental health in the context of divorce. There are now hundreds of anonymous online forums and peer-led support groups where American Muslims can share their experiences without fear of judgment from their local social circles. This digital transparency is breaking down the walls of silence that characterized the 1990s and early 2000s. However, a challenge remains: the financial barrier to mental health care. In 2026, while the community has built the infrastructure, many individuals still struggle to afford the specialized care they need. This has led to a trend of mosques and community centers creating zakat-funded mental health grants. These grants specifically help divorced individuals who are facing financial hardship cover the costs of counseling and psychiatric services. This is a practical application of the Islamic principle of social welfare, ensuring that the most vulnerable members of the community are not left to suffer in silence simply because they cannot pay. As we look at this century of change, it becomes clear that the mental health revolution is not just a Western import. It is a rediscovery of the holistic nature of the human experience, as understood in the Islamic tradition. The goal is no longer just the legal termination of a marriage, but the emotional and spiritual restoration of the individuals involved. We are moving toward a 2026 where a good life is defined not by the absence of struggle, but by the courage to face it with every tool available, whether that is a prayer rug, a therapist's couch, or a legal brief. But as the individuals begin to heal, they eventually face a new daunting challenge. They must step back into a world that often measures success by material stability. What happens to the wealth that was built during the marriage? How do the complex rules of Islamic inheritance and property rights interact with the cold, hard math of an American divorce court? In the next part, we are going to dive into the intricate world of assets, debts, and the financial anatomy of a modern split. We will look at how the 2026 American Muslim is navigating the division of everything from 401ks to crypto wallets, all while trying to maintain their ethical and religious integrity. What happens when the law of the state says one thing but the law of the heart says another? To understand the economic friction of a 2026 divorce, we have to look at the massive gap between the American concept of a marital estate and the Islamic concept of separate property. In the United States, most jurisdictions operate under either community property or equitable distribution rules. This means that from the moment you say "I do," a legal bubble forms around you and your spouse. Almost every dollar earned, every stock option granted, and every piece of furniture purchased during the marriage is dropped into this bubble. When the bubble pops during a divorce, the state steps in to divide the contents, usually 50-50 or in a way the judge deems fair. However, historical trends in Islamic jurisprudence present a very different framework. In the traditional Islamic view, there is no automatic pooling of assets. What a husband earns is his property, though he has a religious obligation to provide for the household. What a wife earns or inherits is hers alone. She is not religiously required to spend a single cent on the mortgage or the groceries. In 2026, this creates a profound ethical and financial dilemma for Muslim American couples sitting across from their spreadsheets. Imagine a couple in 2026, let us call them Jason and Layla, living in Austin, Texas. Jason is a senior developer who has been contributing to a 401k for 10 years. Layla is a successful marketing director who launched a boutique agency 2 years into their marriage. They are now facing a divorce. Under Texas law, which is a community property state, the portion of Jason's 401k that grew during the marriage is considered joint property. Similarly, Layla's business, which she built with her own sweat and late nights, is also seen as a marital asset because it was established during the union. Jason might look at the 401k and feel that according to his religious understanding, that money is his because he earned it. Layla might look at her business and feel that because she did not use any of Jason's funds to start it, it should remain her separate property. But the state of Texas does not care about these individual interpretations. In the eyes of the court, they are an economic unit. This leads to the potential outcomes where a judge orders Jason to transfer half of his retirement savings to Layla, and orders Layla to pay Jason for half the valuation of her agency. In 2026, this financial anatomy becomes even more complex with the rise of digital assets. Consider the case study of a couple who invested heavily in cryptocurrency and non-fungible tokens between 2022 and 2026. If a husband holds a private key to a wallet containing 30 Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin was purchased with income earned during the marriage, it is a marital asset. But how does a court find it? And how does a couple divide it without violating their conscience? We are seeing a trend where forensic accountants are now specifically trained to track blockchain transactions in Muslim American divorce cases. They are not just looking for hidden bank accounts. They are looking for cold storage wallets and decentralized finance yields. The ethical exit strategy is where the 2026 masterclass truly begins. Many couples are now utilizing what is known as a Sharia-compliant settlement agreement within their civil divorce. This is a step-by-step process where the couple agrees to follow the state law for the sake of the legal decree, but then performs a secondary, private calculation to satisfy their religious obligations. For example, Jason and Layla might calculate the total value of the marital estate, as defined by Texas law. Let us say it is $1 million. The law says they each get $500,000. However, if Layla feels that taking Jason's 401k is religiously improper because she did not contribute to it, she might choose to offset that amount. She might say, "I will take the house, but I will waive my right to your retirement account to ensure our division aligns with our faith." This requires a high level of trust and a very skilled mediator who understands both the Internal Revenue Code and the spirit of Islamic finance. This is where the 2026 American Muslim is innovating. They are not choosing between the law of the state and the law of the heart. They are using the flexibility of the American legal system to create a customized third way. We must also address the specific challenges of the 401k and the Qualified Domestic Relations Order, or QDRO. In 2026, many Muslims are concerned about the purity of their investments. If a husband has a 401k that is invested in non-Sharia compliant stocks, such as those involving interest-based banking or prohibited industries, the division of that asset during a divorce becomes a spiritual burden. We are seeing case studies where wives are requesting that their portion of the 401k be liquidated and reinvested into Sharia-compliant mutual funds immediately upon transfer. This adds a layer of administrative complexity that most divorce attorneys are not prepared for, necessitating the involvement of Islamic financial advisors. Furthermore, the family home remains the largest and most emotional asset. In many historical trends, the home was seen as the wife's sanctuary. In 2026, with the high cost of real estate in U.S. metros, the home is often the only significant source of equity. The conflict arises when the mahr is tied to the home. If a husband promised a $50,000 mahr that he never paid, the wife may ask the court to give her an extra $50,000 from the sale of the house to satisfy that debt. While some judges will allow this as a credit for a pre-existing debt, others view it as an attempt to introduce religious law into a civil division. The potential outcomes in these cases often depend on how the debt is characterized. If the attorney describes the mahr as a contractual obligation for a specific sum of money owed to the wife, it has a much higher chance of being honored as a liability of the marital estate. If it is described as a religious gift, it may be dismissed. This is why the precision of language in 2026 is everything. The modern script for a successful financial split involves translating religious concepts into secular legal terminology that a judge in a district court can understand and enforce. But beyond the tangible assets like houses and crypto, there is the question of future earning capacity and professional degrees. In some states, a degree earned during the marriage is considered a marital asset, or at least a factor in determining alimony. For a community that places a high value on education, this can be a flashpoint. If a wife worked to support her husband through medical school, does she have a right to a portion of his future earnings? While Islamic law might not have a direct equivalent to this concept, the American legal principle of equity often says yes. Navigating this requires a delicate balance of recognizing the wife's sacrifice without creating a lifelong financial shackle for the husband. As we look at these complex spreadsheets, a deeper question begins to emerge. If the financial split is handled correctly, it can provide a foundation for a peaceful future. But if it is handled poorly, it can fuel a fire of resentment that lasts for generations. The way a community handles its money during a divorce is a direct reflection of its values. Are we prioritizing the letter of the law or the spirit of fairness? This brings us to the next stage of our deep dive. Financial stability is one thing, but what about the social and religious authority that governs these decisions? Who has the final say when the couple cannot agree on the math? In the next part of this series, we are going to look at the power players of the 2026 divorce landscape. We will examine the rise of the professional Muslim mediator and the changing role of the Sharia Council. We will look at how these institutions are being held accountable in an era of high transparency and how they are competing with secular experts for the trust of the community. What happens when the gatekeepers of the faith are forced to adapt to the realities of 21st century American life? The transition of authority from the neighborhood imam to the institutionalized council is perhaps the most significant structural change in the last century of the American Muslim experience. In the mid-1900s, if a couple in a city like Cleveland or San Jose faced a marital breakdown, their only religious recourse was the local mosque leader. This individual, while often well-intentioned, frequently lacked formal training in American family law or professional mediation techniques. The result was often a series of inconsistent rulings that left families confused and, in some cases, legally vulnerable. By 2026, this informal system has been largely superseded by a professionalized network of mediators and councils that operate with a level of administrative rigor that mirrors the civil court system. This professionalization is not just a matter of choice. It is a response to a community that is increasingly litigious, highly educated, and demanding of transparency. Imagine if we look at the case study of David and Sophia, a couple living in Seattle in 2026. When their marriage reached a point of no return, they did not just walk into a mosque office. Instead, they sought out a certified Muslim mediator, a professional who holds a JD from an American law school and a certificate in conflict resolution, as well as a deep grounding in Islamic jurisprudence. In 2026, this hybrid professional is the new gatekeeper. The process they follow is a step-by-step masterclass in bridging the gap between two worlds. The first step involves an intake process where both parties must agree to a set of ground rules, including a commitment to full financial disclosure. This mirrors the discovery process in a civil suit, preventing the common historical trend where one party might hide assets under the guise of religious privacy. Historical trends show that one of the biggest criticisms of early Sharia councils in the United States was their lack of gender diversity and a perceived bias toward maintaining the marriage at all costs. By 2026, the potential outcomes for someone like Sophia have changed because the councils themselves have changed. We are seeing the rise of the female scholar and mediator within these bodies. Data from 2025 indicates that councils that include women in their decision-making panels have a higher rate of successful mediation and a significantly higher trust rating among younger congregants. These women bring a perspective on child development, domestic labor, and financial independence that was often missing in the all-male panels of the 1980s. Furthermore, the role of the Sharia Council in 2026 has moved from the shadows to the spotlight of public accountability. In an era of instant digital feedback, an imam or a council that issues a ruling seen as unfair or culturally insensitive can face immediate backlash on social media platforms. This has led to the development of standardized protocols across different regions. Organizations like the Assembly of Muslim Jurists in America have worked to create uniform guidelines that help imams navigate the intersection of the First Amendment and the religious requirements of divorce. This standardization reduces the phenomenon of forum shopping, where individuals would travel to different cities seeking an imam who would give them the religious ruling they desired regardless of the civil court's findings. Consider the step-by-step evolution of the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, in 2026. When David and Sophia finish their mediation, they don't just get a verbal blessing. They receive a detailed written document that outlines every aspect of their agreement, from the division of their retirement accounts to the specifics of their co-parenting schedule. This MOU is then reviewed by their respective civil attorneys to ensure it can be incorporated into a state-issued divorce decree. This is the hallmark of the 2026 approach. The religious process is designed to be a precursor to the legal process, not a competitor. By the time they stand before a civil judge, the difficult religious and cultural questions have already been resolved, making the civil proceedings significantly faster and less adversarial. The data on the cost of this new system is also illuminating. In 2026, a litigated divorce in the United States can easily cost a couple between $50,000 and $100,000 in legal fees. Case studies of successful Muslim-led mediation show that couples can resolve their disputes for a fraction of that cost, often under $10,000, by utilizing these professionalized religious frameworks. This financial incentive is a powerful driver for the community's shift toward mediation. It allows families to preserve their wealth for the benefit of their children, rather than depleting it in a protracted legal battle that often yields the same potential outcomes. However, we must address the competition between the sacred and the secular. In 2026, many young American Muslims are choosing to bypass religious councils entirely. They view the civil court system as the only authority that matters, seeing religious divorce as an optional ritual rather than a mandatory requirement. This trend has put immense pressure on religious institutions to remain relevant. To compete with the secular experts, councils are now offering more than just rulings. They are offering holistic services including post-divorce counseling, financial planning, and even help with finding new housing. They are rebranding themselves as community health hubs, rather than just halls of judgment. Imagine if a council fails to adapt. In 2026, a mosque that refuses to recognize a civil divorce, or that handles a domestic violence case poorly can face not just social ostracization, but also potential legal liability. We are seeing a trend of lawsuits where individuals sue religious institutions for negligence or intentional infliction of emotional distress based on the handling of their divorce cases. This legal pressure has accelerated the push for professional malpractice insurance for imams and the requirement for formal training in modern social work and crisis intervention. The gatekeepers are being forced to professionalize because the risks of remaining informal have become too high. This shift also involves a deeper look at the concept of binding arbitration. In 2026, more marriage contracts are including clauses that mandate binding arbitration under the rules of a specific, recognized Muslim mediation body. This is a high-stakes legal maneuver. If the clause is written correctly, a U.S. court will generally uphold the arbitrator's decision, provided it doesn't violate fundamental public policy. This gives the religious council real legal teeth, but it also means they must follow the strict procedural rules of the Federal Arbitration Act. It is a world where the imam must act like a judge, and the judge must respect the imam's expertise in a very specific, narrow lane. As we look at these professionalized systems, we have to ask what is being lost in the transition. While the efficiency and fairness have improved, some argue that the deeply personal pastoral care of the old neighborhood imam is being replaced by a cold, bureaucratic process. Is the 2026 model a success story of integration, or a cautionary tale of a faith becoming just another service industry? The data suggests that while the processes are more clinical, the outcomes are more stable, leading to a generation of divorced individuals who are better equipped to rebuild their lives. But as the parents navigate these new institutions and sign their professionalized MOUs, there is one group that is silently observing everything. The children of these 2026 divorces are growing up in a world where their identity is being managed by lawyers, imams, and mediators. How are they internalizing these two parallel systems of authority? In the next part, we are going to look at the legacy of the century of change. We will examine the first wave of data from the adult children of the 2010s and 2020s Muslim divorces. We will look at how their views on marriage, faith, and the law are different from their parents, and how they are already beginning to rewrite the rules for the next century. What happens when the children of the mediation room become the leaders of the community? To understand the future of the American Muslim community, we must look at the generation that was born into the turbulence of the early 21st century. The children who watched the century of change unfold from the backseats of minivans parked in mosque lots. By the year 2026, the first significant wave of children from high-conflict Muslim divorces in the 2010s has reached adulthood. They are now the lawyers, the tech founders, and the young parents who are taking the reins of the community. Their perspective is not one of shame or silence, but of radical pragmatism. They have spent their lives navigating two homes, two sets of rules, and often two different interpretations of their faith. As a result, they are not just reacting to divorce. They are proactively redesigning the entire institution of marriage to ensure the potential outcomes for their own children are vastly different from what they experienced. Imagine if we follow a character named Sarah, a 28-year-old civil rights attorney in Washington, D.C., in the year 2026. Sarah's parents divorced in 2012 in a process that was characterized by what her generation calls the Great Silence. Her father disappeared into a different state for 3 years, and her mother was quietly excluded from the social leadership of their local Islamic center. Sarah remembers the step-by-step erosion of her sense of community as her family unit fractured. Now, as she prepares for her own nikah in 2026, Sarah is not relying on traditional platitudes. She is utilizing her legal expertise and her lived experience to draft a marriage contract that is a masterclass in risk management. Historical trends among Sarah's peers show a shift toward what is being called the preemptive divorce clause. This is not a sign of pessimism, but of maturity. In 2026, young American Muslims are significantly more likely to demand a detailed, legally binding prenuptial agreement that is mirrored in their religious contract. Sarah's contract includes a social media conduct clause, a modern necessity that prevents either party from disparaging the other or sharing private family details on digital platforms during or after a separation. This is a direct response to the digital trauma many of her peers faced when their parents' divorces became public spectacles on community Facebook groups in the 2020s. By 2026, the data indicates that couples who engage in this level of granular, uncomfortable planning before the wedding have a much higher rate of maintaining an amicable relationship, even if the marriage eventually ends. We must also examine the data regarding the marital attitudes of Gen Z and Gen Alpha Muslims in 2026. Research shows that this generation is waiting longer to marry, with the average age for a first marriage rising to 30. They are prioritizing career stability and emotional intelligence over the traditional pressure to marry young. Case studies from university campuses across the United States show that Muslim student associations are no longer just holding mixers. They are hosting workshops on conflict resolution and the financial realities of household management. This is the generation of the split, and they are obsessed with data. They want to know the potential outcomes of every decision. They are looking at the case studies of the 2010s to identify the red flags that their parents' generation often ignored under the guise of religious duty. The theological evolution driven by this generation is equally profound. In 2026, we see young scholars who grew up in single-parent households reevaluating classical texts through the lens of their own childhoods. They are moving away from a theology of endurance toward a theology of flourishing. They argue that a marriage that stunts the spiritual and emotional growth of the individuals involved is not serving the higher purposes of the faith. This has led to the demythologizing of divorce. In the year 2026, the phrase "until death do us part" is being replaced in some circles with a commitment to mutual dignity, for as long as the union serves the well-being of the family. This is a seismic shift in the social fabric, moving the focus from the survival of the contract to the survival of the soul. Step by step, this generation is also transforming the physical and social structure of the mosque. Imagine Sarah walking into a newly built Islamic center in Northern Virginia in 2026. This building was designed with her generation's needs in mind. There is a dedicated office for family mediation, staffed not by a volunteer, but by a professional who holds a dual degree in social work and Islamic studies. There are support groups for children of divorce, acknowledging the unique identity crisis that comes from growing up in two different religious environments. The Mosque of 2026 is no longer a place that hides the divorced. It is a place that integrates them into the leadership. This is a direct result of Sarah and her peers refusing to be the invisible children of the community. The concept of the two-home identity has also created a more flexible and pluralistic religious identity among young American Muslims. Children who grew up spending one weekend at a strictly observant father's house and the next at a more liberal mother's house have developed a unique ability to navigate different levels of religiosity. In 2026, this has translated into a community that is less judgmental and more focused on the core values of the faith. Data suggests that the adult children of divorce are often the ones most involved in interfaith work and social justice movements, as their personal histories have trained them to bridge divides and find common ground in high-conflict situations. They are the natural mediators of the 21st century. However, we cannot ignore the challenges that remain. The 2026 landscape still deals with the lingering effects of the Mar disputes and the limping marriages of the previous decade. But the difference is that Sarah's generation is building the legal and social infrastructure to make those issues obsolete. They are creating apps that track child support payments and shared custody schedules, integrating them with religious calendars to ensure that faith is a source of stability rather than a point of contention. They are using blockchain technology to create transparent, unalterable marriage contracts that can be easily verified by both civil courts and religious councils. This is the digitization of the sacred, a way to use modern tools to protect ancient values. As we look at the potential outcomes of this generational shift, we see a community that is becoming more resilient. By confronting the reality of divorce head-on, they are actually strengthening the institution of marriage. They are making it more honest, more transparent, and more grounded in the actualities of American life. The century of change has been a period of immense pain, but it has also been a period of unprecedented growth. The children who grew up in the mediation rooms of the 2010s are now the architects of a new American Muslim identity, one that is defined not by the perfection of its families, but by the integrity with which it handles its brokenness. But as this new generation takes the lead, a final question remains. What does the ultimate synthesis look like? After 100 years of struggle, adaptation, and evolution, where does the American Muslim family go from here? In the final part of our masterclass, we are going to bring all these threads together. We will look at the global impact of the American Muslim divorce experience and how it is influencing family law in Muslim-majority countries. We will provide a visionary look at the next 50 years, outlining the definitive roadmap for a community that has finally learned how to balance the laws of the land with the laws of the heart. What is the final secret to a marriage and a divorce that honors the past while securing the future? The final secret to a marriage and a divorce that honors the past while securing the future in 2026 is the complete collapse of the wall between the secular and the sacred. We have moved past the era where a family must choose which law to follow. The ultimate synthesis is a model of legal and spiritual integration where every religious obligation is mirrored by a civil protection, and every civil right is exercised with the religious conscience. This is what scholars are beginning to call the American ijtihad, a fresh interpretation of ancient principles necessitated by the unique challenges of the 21st century Western landscape. By 2026, the potential outcomes for a couple entering into this system are no longer defined by uncertainty, but by a rigorous double-stitch framework that protects the interests of the husband, the wife, and most importantly, the children. To see this in action, we must look at the case study of Aiden and Nora, a couple marrying in Seattle in 2026. They represent the culmination of the trends we have explored throughout this masterclass. When Aiden and Nora sat down to plan their life together, they did not just pick out a wedding venue. They engaged in a 6-month step-by-step process of structural family building. They hired a mediator who specialized in Sharia-compliant prenuptial agreements. This document, which they signed 3 weeks before their religious ceremony, did not just mention the mahr. It detailed exactly how their community property would be divided in the event of a divorce, how their 401ks would be handled to maintain ethical purity, and how they would utilize a Sharia council for binding arbitration if mediation failed. For Nora and Aiden, this was not a lack of trust, it was the ultimate act of care. They were documenting their values while they were in a state of love, so that if they ever found themselves in a state of conflict, their future selves would be protected by the wisdom of their past selves. Historical trends over the last century show that the most traumatic divorces occurred when there was a mismatch between the couple's expectations and the legal reality. In 2026, the American Muslim community is closing that gap. We are seeing a reverse migration of ideas where the innovations happening in the United States, such as the delegated right of divorce for women and the inclusion of mental health professionals in religious councils, are now being studied and even adopted by family law reformers in Muslim-majority countries like Morocco, Jordan, and Malaysia. The American experience has become a laboratory for the future of Islamic family law globally. This is the legacy of a century of struggle, the creation of a system that is robust enough to handle the complexities of modern life without losing its spiritual essence. The data from 2026 indicates that the most successful outcomes in divorce are found in couples who utilize a dual-track filing system. This is a step-by-step procedure where the civil divorce petition and the religious council application are filed simultaneously. This ensures that the clock starts on both processes at the same time, preventing the years of spiritual limbo that characterized the 1990s and early 2000s. By 2026, many American Sharia councils have even begun issuing a standardized civil Islamic divorce certificate. This document is recognized by the religious community as a valid dissolution and can be filed with the civil court as part of the final settlement agreement. This represents a high level of institutional maturity, where the mosque and the courthouse are operating in a state of mutual respect and administrative alignment. But the real revolution is not just in the paperwork, it is in the social capital of the community. Imagine the scene at a local Islamic center in 2026. A recently divorced man or woman is not sitting in the back of the prayer hall, avoiding eye contact. They are leading youth groups, serving on boards, and being sought out for their perspective on resilience. The stigma that once functioned as a social prison has been replaced by a culture of support. Case studies from vibrant communities in Dallas and Northern Virginia show that when a mosque provides transparent, fair, and professionalized divorce services, the overall health of the community improves. People are less afraid to marry when they know that if it fails, they will not be cast out or exploited. This has led to a historical trend of higher quality marriages, as individuals are choosing partners based on compatibility and shared values rather than social pressure. The potential outcomes for the next generation are the most promising part of this 2026 reality. We are seeing children who grow up with a healthy, normalized view of co-parenting. They see their parents navigating a complex world with integrity. They understand that while a marriage may end, the family's commitment to faith and to each other's well-being does not. This is the ultimate goal of the century of change. It was never about making divorce easier. It was about making the individuals involved more protected and the community more just. As we conclude this deep dive, we have to address the roadmap for the future. The next 50 years will likely see even more integration. We may see the rise of Muslim-specific family law courts that operate as recognized arbitration bodies within the U.S. legal system, much like the Beth Din in the Jewish community. We will likely see more sophisticated digital tools that use artificial intelligence to help couples navigate the intersection of their religious debts and their civil taxes. But at the core of all this technology and law is the human heart. The final secret is the realization that justice is a spiritual requirement. In 2026, the American Muslim is no longer a passenger in the legal system. They are the architect of a new way of living that honors the ancient while embracing the modern. The journey from the isolated immigrant enclaves of the 1920s to the professionalized, integrated powerhouses of 2026 has been a story of immense courage. It has been a century of trial and error, of heartbreak and healing. But as we stand here today, the data is clear. The American Muslim family is not in decline. It is in a state of profound transformation. We are moving toward a future where every family, regardless of its structure, has the tools it needs to flourish in the shade of the law and the light of the faith. So, as you reflect on everything we have covered, the legal mechanics of the MAR, the psychological impact on children, the rise of the digital marriage market, and the professionalization of the councils, ask yourself, how are you preparing for the shifts that are coming next? The rules of the game are being rewritten in real time. The landscape of 2026 is just the beginning. The innovations we are seeing today in Seattle, Houston, and New York are the blueprints for a global movement. Are you ready to be a part of the next chapter? This masterclass has provided the data, the historical trends, and the case studies to give you a clear-eyed view of where we are and where we are going. But knowledge without action is just trivia. The real work happens in the marriage contracts being signed today, in the mediation rooms of tomorrow, and in the way we speak to our neighbors about the challenges they face. We have decoded the last 100 years, so that you can navigate the next 100 with confidence and clarity. The loop is now open for a new discussion. What happens when these American models begin to collide with the rigid traditionalism of the global stage? As the world becomes more connected, the American Muslim divorce experience is becoming a major export. In our next series, we will explore the international fallout of this century of change. We will look at how the 2026 American model is causing a ripple effect in the courtrooms of the Middle East and South Asia. What happens when a woman divorced in a New York court tries to claim her rights in a courtroom in Lahore or Cairo? The friction is just beginning, and the stakes are higher than ever. Stay tuned as we continue this deep dive into the global evolution of family, faith, and the law.